This video will show you how to simplify or reduce fractions. Everything that we do in this video should be copied down in your notebook based on the way we set it up together. So first of all, a definition. What does it mean to simplify fractions? To simplify fractions means to make the fraction as simple as possible. So for example, down at the bottom, 4/8, if I were to simplify 4/8 or make it as simple as possible, it would be 1/2. Because if I draw my picture, here I have my 8 sections, and if I shade in 4 of them, it's the same as 1/2. So if I were to draw just 1/2, it would be exactly the same as 4/8. So if I simplify 4/8 into 1/2, that's just making it as simple as possible. One thing we should know before we learn how to simplify fractions or review how to simplify fractions is a factor. So factors are numbers you multiply to get a product. So for example, if we do 12, so if I ask you what are the factors of 12, I would list them. So what numbers, 2 numbers, can I multiply together to get a product of 12? I know that one would be 12 and 1, because 12 times 1 is 12. Another would be 4 and 3, because 4 times 3 is 12. And another one would be 6 and 2, because 6 times 2 is 12. So these are all factors of 12. Let's do another example. Let's say 18. So if I ask you what are the factors of 18, you would tell me a pair of numbers that I multiply together to get that product of 18. So for example, I can start with 18 and 1 because I know 18 times 1 is 18. I can do 9 and 2 because 9 times 2 is 18. I can also do 6 and 3 because 6 times 3 is 18. So these are factors of 18. Numbers I can multiply together to get a product of 18. So these are the 3 steps of how to simplify a fraction. These 3 steps should be copied down in your notes. Step 1, list the factors of the numerator and denominator. Step 2, determine the greatest common factor. Step 3, divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. Again, these steps should be copied in your notes, so please feel free to pause the video to copy down the steps. So this is we do number 1, so we'll simplify this fraction together. So remember, step 1 is to list the factors of the numerator and denominator. So I'll do that down at the bottom. So the numerator is 8, the denominator is 24. So let's start with 8. So let's list the factors of 8. What numbers do I multiply or can I multiply together to get that product of 8? The first one I know is 8 and 1 because 8 times 1 is 8. Another one I know is 4 and 2 because 4 times 2 is 8. So there are no other factors of 8, so let's move to factors of 24. So first of all, I know I can do 24 times 1 because that's 24. I can also do 12 times 2 because 12 times 2 is 24. I can do 6 and 4 because 6 times 4 is 24. And I can do 8 and 3 because I know 8 times 3 is 24. So these are the factors of 8 and 24. That's step 1. List the factors. Step 2, determine the greatest common factor. So what I mean by the greatest common factor is, first of all, let's go ahead and circle the factors that 8 and 24 have in common. So at 8, up here I see 8, and then 24 also has a factor of 8. 1 they have in common. And then 4 they have in common, and also 2 they have in common. So these are common factors, but I want the greatest common factor. So what's the greatest here I see is 8 and 8 because that's the biggest number. So determine the greatest common factor is step 2. Step 3, divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. So if I go back up to my fraction, 8/24, I'm going to divide the numerator and denominator by 8 because that's the greatest common factor. So now I know that 8 divided by 8 is 1, and then 24 divided by 8 is 3. So if I were to simplify 8/24 into lowest terms, we call it, it would be 1/3. Next, we do number 2, simplify 12/60ths. So first, list the factors of the numerator and denominator. So let's list the factors of 12 and then 60. So let's start with 12. I know that, again, 12 times 1 will give me 12. 6 times 2 will give me 12. And then 4 times 3 will also give me 12, a product of 12. So these are the factors of 12. Let's list the factors of 60. I know that 60 times 1 will give me 60. 30 times 2 will give me 60. 10 times 6 will give me 60. 15 and 3 will give me 60. Nope. 15 and 4 will give me 60, sorry. And then I also know that 12 and 5 will give me 60. So these are all the factors of 60. And then step 2, it says determine the greatest common factor. So here they have 12 in common and 12 in common. They also have 1 in common, 6 in common, 2, 4, and then 3 we forgot. But the greatest common factor here is 12. So then I divide, step 3, divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. So I divide both the numerator and denominator by 12. I know that 12 divided by 12 is 1. 60 divided by 12, I know, is 5. So 12/60ths, if I were to simplify it, would be 1/5. All right, this is our last we do number 3, simplify 15/48. So again, step 1, list the factors of the numerator and denominator. So we'll list the factors of 15 and list the factors of 48. So 15, I know I can do 15 times 1. I can do 5 times 3. There are no other factors for 15, so let's move on to 48. I know 48, I can do 48 times 1. I know I can also do 12 times 4. And then I also know I could do 16 times 3. So these are the factors. Oh, I can also do 24 and 2. So if you miss some of the factors, that's okay, because you'll eventually realize it once you're simplifying the fraction. So let's move on to step 2, determine the greatest common factor. So again, what they have in common, but it has to be the greatest value. So if I look here, I know 15 is not common, 1 is common, but it's not very great or high. 5 they don't have in common, so 3 they also have in common. So the greatest common factor would be 3. Step 3 says divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. So I divide 15 by 3 and then 48 by 3. I know that 15 divided by 3 is 5. 48 divided by 3 I know is 16. So this 5/16 cannot be simplified anymore because 5 and 16 don't have any factors in common because 5 is a prime number. So 15/48 in simplest form would be 5/16. Your next task is to complete the you-dos. So the 6 you-dos should be completed on a separate sheet of paper. You can divide your page into 6 sections, just like what we do for the stations, if there are 6 stations. So simplify the following, show your steps. So I need to see you listing the factors for the numerator and the denominator, determining the greatest common factor, and then dividing the numerator and the denominator by the greatest common factor. So the 6 problems should be completed again on a separate sheet of paper. And then once you're finished, in the room there are 2 answer keys that are posted. So once you're finished, feel free to get up and check your answers. Once you're done, turn in your you-dos to Miss Ladigan.